For decades, the United States has had an existential problem with illegal immigration. This isn't something that's new. It wasn't something that was created under the Biden administration. We've had it for a long time. And Republicans in Congress and in the rest of the country outside of Washington, D.C., demanded border security, that Washington would actually do what we said we would do on the campaign trail and secure the border and stop the flow of illegal immigration. And what would happen in Washington is that Republicans would ask for border security. We would ask for a wall. We would ask for things that we can fund that would stem this tide of illegal immigration. And in response from the other side of the aisle, we would hear demands for amnesty, a pathway to citizenship for people who have no business being here to begin with, who came here illegally. And the result was that nothing was done to secure the border. One of the things that I'm most excited about the big, beautiful bill that we are working on and are going to get passed next week is that finally we can fund border security and mass deportations that the American people demand without having to negotiate on amnesty. In other words, the American people get what they would like. Republicans get all of our priorities. We get a border wall, we get river barriers, we get 10,000 new ICE agents. And we don't have to deal with demands for mass amnesty. That is a huge win, not only for conservatives, but for all Americans. And I'm excited about getting that done. I believe that mass migration is the single biggest existential threat to our country today. And we're going to begin by fixing that. So thank you to the witnesses for being here. Mrs. Vaughn, I'd like to start with you. I really appreciate your time here. Some claim that in order to finally secure the border for good, we need to make a deal on amnesty or to expand our already extraordinarily generous legal immigration system or work visa programs. Does this viewpoint put the interests of the American people first?
Absolutely not. The biggest problem, well, first of all, we've tried this in the past and it never worked. It was always amnesty now, enforcement if we get around to it. And so this doesn't work, but what we do know also from experience is that every time amnesty is raised, it destroys all incentive people have to voluntarily comply with immigration laws and go home on their own if they don't have a path to legal status. It creates incentives for people to stay here illegally and incentives for people to start trying to cross the border illegally as well. We should not be discussing, contemplating an amnesty of any kind until there is integrity and enforcement of the immigration laws that we have. That's just not something that should be on the table now.
Have the American people ever been promised border security in exchange for amnesty in the past?
Oh, repeatedly, most notably in 1986, when the amnesty happened immediately, was given to more people than we were told would be qualifying for it, and the enforcement promises were never applied, never materialized. And it's been promised in a number of other types of legislation in 2013, in 2007. It's always the same thing. Amnesty now, we'll promise to give you enforcement later.
Whenever amnesty is brought up in the national conversation, have you found that it leads to increased illegal immigration?
That is definitely what happened in 2012 before the so-called Gang of Eight bill. And during that discussion, and it has happened in the past as well. In fact, well, look at what happened before the Biden administration took office. They had promised amnesty during the campaign, and the illegal crossings and encounters at the border went up even before Biden took office in January. They were up substantially in December, the month before that.
Yep. And then I'd like to ask you about our green card system. Approximately how many immigrants are approved for permanent residency each year?
It's about 1 million per year,
About 1 million. And how many of those are via chain migration?
about 60%.
60%. Awesome.
In May, not one illegal alien was released into the United States. So, Mr. Naurista, do you consider that to be a successful month?
Yeah.
Good.
Yes.
Good. I'm always looking for accommodation and comedy, so we have some comedy right there.
I think we have more than that,
So,
sir.
I don't know. We'll find out. The most recent Congressional Border Security Caucus, we had the ICE director, acting ICE director, Mr. Todd Lyons, come in. Mr. Lyons was describing visa overstays. So I would ask the panel, are you all familiar with the term visa overstays, Mr. Brown? You need to answer it out loud. Yeah. This is like a court law. You got to answer it out loud.
Very familiar.
Okay. Mr. Naurista?
Yes.
Mr. Hankinson?
Yes.
And Ms. Vaughn?
Yes.
So let's talk about one visa overstay. I'm thinking of the Egyptian fellow who went on a rampage, an anti-Semitic rampage, and attacked people in Boulder, Colorado. Did you know that he was a visa overstay, Mrs. Vaughn?
Yes.
And what type of visa did he have before he overstayed?
I don't think I have seen it confirmed, but I believe it was a visitor visa, B1, B2.
That's what's been reported anyways, that it was a visitor visa. And how many, Mr. Hankinson, how many visa overstays are there in the country right now, roughly? Microphone.
Maybe 500,000 a year, total overstays, but not all of those are permanent. The figures are a bit difficult to parse.
Okay, so when we look at visa overstays, I want to go back here now to Mrs. Vaughn for a sec. Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, the architect of the 9/11 attack, said that marriage fraud is a, quote, fantastic mechanism for terrorist operatives to acquire valid documents, close quote. And, but rather than you, will go, Mr. Brown. Do you agree with that?
Absolutely.
And can you, you've given in your opening statement, you talked about how marriage fraud enterprises work. How would you describe DHS's process for detecting marriage fraud, Mr. Brown? Do they do that? Can they do that?
Their process is virtually non-existent. When I refer to the deliberate dismantling of anti-fraud safeguards, this is a great example. For example, under the last administration, one of the key fraud safeguards that Congress enacted in the Immigration Marriage Fraud Amendments Act of 1986 was interviews. They started waiving all the interviews. When our clients reported fraud, you know what they got back? Silence, nothing.
Yeah.
And I want to make this point. We have obtained internal data from USCIS. And from 2016 to 2019, a little subset, you know what their fraud denial rate was for the marriage-based cases? 0%, rounded to the nearest whole number. This is not accidental. Something is deeply, deeply wrong with our immigration system. And there's a lot of innocent Americans who are suffering.
Thank you for that. Mr. Hankinson, what's the process like for vetting student visa applicants?
Well, it's as good as we can make it. The interviews take just a couple of minutes, and most of the information that they provide can't be immediately verified. So we probably get it right most of the time.
So we have the acting ICE director told us the other day that in re-looking at some of these student visas, they had a student from China who was entering his 13th year of a baccalaureate degree program for a bachelor's degree. That seems, I don't know. I've put kids through college, and thank goodness none of them ever took 13 years to get through college. And if Mrs. Vaughn, if a student commits a crime or otherwise does something that would disqualify them for continuing on the student visa, how does that get reported to ICE or the school?
Well, if they are arrested for a state or local crime, ICE will get that information through the Secure Communities program. But ICE is not necessarily going to prioritize it because that, as a student visa holder, they are entitled to more due process than, for example, someone who's in the country illegally and commits the same crime.
So what the director told us is that it's not often that they're notified, and the school is rarely notified as well.
Yeah, the school wouldn't necessarily be notified.
So as my time expires, I would point out to my committee members that there's been some suggestions by Mr. Brown, Mr. Hankins, and Mrs. Vaughn on some ways to fix the visa system. I think it's worth reviewing.
Do you believe the immigration system improved under the Biden administration?
Under some ways, yes, in some ways, no. So it's a very large, complex system, as you know. It's second in complexity only to the income tax.
So your colleague David Beer was here about 6 months ago, and he said, yes, the immigration system improved under the Biden administration. What's the change here of Cato's position?
So the Cato Institute doesn't have positions. The scholars of the Cato Institute do. But if you want to narrow in on the legal immigration system, then I agree with my colleague David that the legal immigration system did improve during the Biden administration. But there's large other sections of immigration that have to do with enforcement, other categories
you're
of
going around
things.
telling people around the country here today that, hey, I'm going to split hairs, and I'm going to tell people that this one subset of immigration, hey, things are just fine in the United States of America. It's all good. When they understand this as a broader part of the immigration system as a whole, which has been a complete failure.
Well, sir,
So
I
you're
don't
saying-
work in talking points like that. I'm interested in facts, and the legal immigration system is not just fine. I've spent my career writing about how we need to expand legal immigration. So no, I don't go around saying it's just fine. I said that things have improved, and no, I don't go around
Sir,
talking
don't
in
filibuster.
talking
I
points.
got questions to ask, and I only have 5 minutes. So you're saying you say in here vetting is effective and the visa process is secure. You stand by that, right?
Absolutely.
How did 350,000 children come into America that we have no idea where they're at the end of the Biden administration? How are there 600,000 criminal aliens in this country that committed oftentimes violent crimes, everything from attempted murder to carjacking?
The vast majority of those did not go through the legal immigration system. That is entirely the point that we are trying to make here today, is that they did not go through the legal immigration. If they did, then most of those people would have been weeded out.
This administration, which you said
This
did a
administration
good
or the
job in
last
some
one?
ways. The previous administration, they just let people come in without being able to get a visa. So, does your data that you purport to put out there that proves this, does it include the death of Stephen Nashwam, a truck driver in Rusk County, Wisconsin, up where I live, who left behind 3 daughters? Does that include him in the data? He's dead as a result of an illegal alien running him off the road?
The evidence that we have is
Does
based
it include
on,
the 2 children in Abbotsford,
It
Wisconsin?
includes all
also in
people who
my
are convicted
district,
of crimes
who
in
are
this country,
dead
sir, and
as
all
a
people who
result
are
of an
arrested and
illegal-
all people who are incarcerated for crimes in the United States during multiple years, including the great state of Texas, which has wonderful data, the best crime data out there, confirms my research. Every death and every murder is a tragedy, and those individual criminals should be punished to the fullest extent of the law.
Is Mr.
But that is not a
Nashwam or
reason to
these other-
punish
are
other
they
people
in
who
the
are
data?
not criminals for
Are
that.
they in the data?
Of course.
Are the 100,000 children that died of or young people, #1 killer of young people in America, ages what, 21 to 45, fentanyl? Do you include the fentanyl
You mean the
deaths?
people who voluntarily took fentanyl and overdosed under that tragic situations? No, those are not homicides, sir.
Or do you mean the communist Chinese who sent the precursors over here and then the cartels
talking about the drug
brewed
war
it
now? We're
and
talking
sent
about
it
the
in.
drug war?
And by the way, they sent it in being carried by people who are coming in with the immigration
Why don't you
system.
count? Why don't you count the
are
automobiles
defending.
imported that also
But
cause
you are
car
defending.
accidents?
Have you done, in your data, have you reviewed the impact on wages for those who are in the lowest economic strata with these millions of people coming into America taking their jobs? I'll end there. Ms. Vaughn.
Of course,
Ms.
I have.
Vaughn.
Vast economic literature on
Ms.
that
Vaughn,
contradicts your statement.
share with us, has there been an impact on Americans' earnings as a result of illegal immigration?
There's no question that illegal immigration causes unfair competition, costing people job opportunities, depressing their wages, and causing those millions of Americans who've dropped out of the labor market to have trouble getting back into it. No question.
So it's clear they're making less money.
Yes.
And that should be included in any data set when we're considering what we should do with immigration. Is that correct?
That's the inevitable result. That's supply and demand. When you increase the supply of labor, distort the labor markets, you're going to get lower wages.
Supply and
Mr.
demand. You're only talking about supply. These
Hankins-
immigrants are
No.
people
Out
who also raise wages.
No, I'll direct the questions to you, sir. Mr. Hankins.
not asking a question.
Was there a cost to the fentanyl deaths here in America?
The open border made it a lot easier to bring in a lot of drugs, and a lot of drugs killed, as you said, about 66,000 people, just fentanyl alone in 1 year.
How much do you value a life?
You can't put a price on a human life.
I yield back.